All right, so Sunday morning, I think the plan is to work on electrical. Got most of my wiring back here at the engine. Thinking about going up the side rail in the bank corner up to that firewall, across the back, and then make connections behind the instrument panel and the controls. So figure out how to tie that up. It'd be nice to have some kind of junction there that wasn't loose wiring, but probably hanging the wiring on the deck runners will probably be adequate, I would think. Just make sure it's secure and, you know, rubber mounted, stuff like that. So that's the plan today. I've got these holes in the side of that corner I cut to straighten that bend, and I'm thinking I picked up some tubing when I was getting some scrap metal for the seat mounting. I didn't realize I had, but that's cool. I'm thinking about using this tubing and putting it inside, but possibly cutting out a section to where it's open, and then put it in this corner here on the inside and plug weld all these, and then laying this as a wire track where the wire looms can have just a way to pull them out without having to fish through, because there's going to be connectors on both ends. It's just basically going to be reconnected. So, you know, it'd be nice to be able to remove that if I needed to, and not have the wires through there permanent and have to cut and splice just to get that out. For whatever reason I might need to. You know, hopefully it wouldn't, but I don't know, I think that's the plan right now, is to put this in as a wire chase, plug weld these, and go ahead and start building that. Alright, so this is the side of the boat the wiring's going to be on, and so this is the corner here. Planning on putting it right here in this crease here, this bend. So first thing on this loom, I believe, is the plug to plug in and analyze, you know, with an analyzer and look at the computer, what's going on. So that is wire tied on. Bunch of wires heading back towards the engine. So we'll see what we do with that. If I can pull that back and get it out of the way, that'd be great. Just because, you know, I'm planning on having this tubing here that this is going to be laying in. So other than that, this is about the position. You know, we're back towards the front of the motor with this cluster here, and these are all going to the instrument panel and the handlebar controls, except for one is the fuel gauge connector. So that I'm going to try and pull back through the loom, keep it back here, and this, I looked it up, I forgot what it was, but it was just mounted in the front of the hull of the jet ski underneath the handlebar area. And this here was the hood on the front of the jet ski. It had like a latch sensor. So, and when I ran the engine, I didn't do anything with that. So I don't know exactly what that is, if it just creates a light saying you're not latched, or what the deal is. We'll find out, but it just looks like a magnetic sensor. And I looked for it, but there's got to be a magnet in the plastic on that hood near the latch. So deal with that. It might just be, you know, put a magnet on it. And then this, I think I can just disconnect here. Hopefully I can just pull these wires back out of the way, mount it in the rear. And so essentially most of this, except for one, will be extended towards the front. Now the steering sensor is just going to be, this is just going to be permanently placed on it in a straight position as far as steering is concerned. So, deer walking by the shop and getting scared by me talking. Anyway, and then this is an audible, just a buzzer. So, or a beep, whatever. I assume, when you turn it on and stuff, it beeps. That's just for that. So I'm gonna try and get these to go towards the rear of the boat, and basically just take what needs to go forward, and then tie up the rest back here. So I bought a bunch of wire, went online, looked it up, figured, okay, 16, 18 gauge, that's going to be what we're looking at in here. I think some of these are probably 22 gauge. I'm not really sure, but haven't cut anything open yet. So I ordered the stuff online, and this 16 gauge came in, and the stranded, the size of a strip stranded wire looks a little bigger than 16 gauge, but it's pretty close. Just from what I'm used to on regular 16 AWG, control wiring and HVAC and stuff. But this insulation is super thick. The insulation is more like what I would see in, 12 gauge standard, high voltage wiring. So I ordered connectors size for the wire, and they're heat shrink connectors, but the connectors themselves could easily fit 12 gauge. You could probably even slip 10 in there. And I'm like, well, crap. And they came in the right part number, all that stuff. Ordered them online, wanted to get high quality wire, didn't want the cheap, Chinese junk. Harbor Freight carries some of this stuff. And this wire is what they call, marine grade tinned wire. So I'm like, well, great. Well, I'm sure that'll hold up just fine. But, so I got all these heat shrink connectors, and this is the Harbor Freight version, and this is the expensive stuff I bought online. So the problem is, if I could easily slip 12 gauge regular stuff in there, this crimp connector is bigger than the insulation on the 16 gauge wire, but this is what they send for 16 gauge, and I'm like, well, that doesn't work. Somebody's not figuring this right. And it says right on it, 16.1. And I'm like, well, okay, so that's their connector for 16 gauge. So I suppose I'll go ahead and use it, see how well it does on this wire. The problem is I'm going to be connecting two smaller wires. So not sure how that's going to work. Then I go to the Harbor Freight version. I'm like, well, the wire will fit better in the butt connector itself, and this, might actually heat shrink down onto both wires. So I'm going to give that a try. Might just have to go with the cheapo Harbor Freight butt connectors, just because they're sized better for the wiring. Which kind of sucks. These were pretty expensive, but whatever. I'll never use these for anything. I don't know that it's returnable. It's probably not worth it. But the other issue is, so I got some of this 3/4 wire conduit. It's something I was going to run up along the boat there, in that tubing that I'm going to cut open and weld on. So this bundle here would fit just fine in that 3/4. There'd be a little extra room left over, not a lot, but if I end up running a bunch of these things, so I got these in 12 and 18, or 16 and 18, but insulation isn't, size on the 18 isn't much smaller than the 16, so I'm gonna end up with this massive loom, because there's over 20 wires there, and this is just what has to go to the front. of the boat, under the dash. Everything else I've stripped back. It's going to go back closer to the fuel tank and come between the fuel tank and the battery, you know, where it's coming out of the engine area. But I don't know, I'm probably going to go ahead and proceed. I'll probably do a test on these, you know, see where how they work on both sides. Otherwise, man, that's going to be a thick old wiring loom. You know, 20 of these things. I guess I could just cut 20 pieces off and you know, wrap them up and see what the diameter is going to be. Otherwise, I'm ordering more wire, and I guess I just have to go extremely small with this marine grade, you know, tin copper wire. So anyway. Alright, so I went ahead and threw together a piece of wire with both types of terminals. These are kind of the expensive online ones. They seem really nice otherwise. This is your Harbor Freight version, which, you know, after crimping, I don't really see that either one broke the material, so there shouldn't be a leak there. Although I'd say this one looks better. So I guess, you know, they seem to seal really well. So I don't think there's any issues there. I'm just kind of curious to see how we do on strength. They both crimp the same way. Crap. Yeah, I can't get it, and I'm not a wimp, so I'd say they're doing pretty good. Probably just ruined those, but whatever. It was a test. Well, I never get as much done as I'd hope I'd get, but got a good start on the electrical. So that's the track I made, or the trough, if you will. Seems like it'll work out pretty well. I do wish I had drilled holes in the bottom of it before I welded it on, but I'm just going to go with a single hole in the bottom of the track, and I'll pull the zip tie from the bottom up, around, and back to the same hole, and the head of the zip tie will hold it in, and it'll secure it in that trough. So back here, this is where this ended up. Got the little electronic box and the two magnetic sensors that are not going to be used, so they'll just be tied up back here. Might try and figure out a way to mount that box. It's got some weight to it. Really don't want it flopping around, so it needs to be secured somehow. And then basically, these wire looms coming over the engine, the control box, gonna go between the battery box, which you can see the battery cables right there. The battery box will be there. Just something I need to decide is what size battery. You know, I wasn't going to use the original battery, but I just thought, you know, if I'm going to put a bilge pump in here, you know, it'd just be better to have a little extra storage. So anyway, that's the electrical coming up over here. That's everything I have to extend. Coming up across the side, and I'm just going to use the bottom lip of this right here. Because there's enough space underneath the cluster right here to run a wire loom, and it'll all connect real nice and tie up. You know, I'll probably use like a flathead screw and a bolt type thing with the rubber clamp, or metal clamp with rubber, you know, that kind of thing. And then over here, basically ended up with this setup. For now, I don't really care for these, you know, but they're totally functional and comfortable to grab and control. So, you know, aesthetics set aside, it is what it is. It's gonna be connected that way for now. Then these wires will continue on underneath and all the way out and across. So, a little funky, but it's going to be the setup to start with. And I tend to have a feeling this boat's going to be a continual work, even once it becomes, you know, worthy of putting in the water and functional. I'm a little concerned about that sound I heard. I'm thinking about pulling the jet pump off and inspecting it, seeing if the impeller was hitting, because it just sounded like metal to metal. Kind of sucks. I'm not really sure what to do with that if it's not lined up right. I mean, there's movement in that bearing, so it shouldn't be too critical, but I suppose if the alignment from the adapter that the pump mounts to coming up there is off, it might pull the impeller off slightly, and it's, you know, tolerances are pretty critical, I think, on those. So since it's made the noise a couple times, if it's metal to metal on the impeller, I should be able to see that. I'm really not sure what I would be doing for correction on that. You know, because basically they're just both bolted to cast housing and a pump adapter. So I really hope that's not it. You know, if it is, it's like, holy crap. You know, if this ends up being a bad casting and it wasn't lined up right, that's a nightmare. But we'll hope not. Hopefully it's not scraping, but I don't know if you guys heard the noise in a previous video. So anyway, electrical's coming along. You know, once that electrical's tied up, I'll get right on the seat. I've been looking for a trailer. It's either completely rebuild the jet ski one with the wider axle and everything, you know, just as a basis to start with. It's got a good frame, or just find a used one online, you know, Craigslist, whatever. And there's nothing in our area right now, so it sucks to have to travel for a trailer, you know, 2, 3, 4 hours. You know, that's where I've seen them all. So anyway, not sure about that, but I'll keep moving forward with this. Later.